Brian Nisenfeld, a bright 18-year-old college student at Roger Williams University in Rhode Island, was a young man with his whole life ahead of him. In January 1997, Brian was attending his sophomore year, where he had hopes of building a future in psychology. However, beneath his promising academic future lay a troubled young man grappling with deep emotional issues, struggling to adapt to college life, and feeling increasingly isolated. His disappearance is a haunting mystery, full of strange details and questions that have never been fully answered. Brian was known to be quiet and introverted, often preferring solitude over the hustle and bustle of campus life. He had few close friends and spent much of his time in his room or engrossed in his studies. His classmates recall him as intelligent, though somewhat distant and reserved. Things seemed to take a darker turn for Brian in the months leading up to his disappearance. His behavior became increasingly erratic. He reportedly stopped attending classes and appeared disconnected from those around him. According to his family, Brian struggled with depression and a sense of hopelessness, which may have been exacerbated by his feelings of isolation on campus. On January 31st, 1997, Brian was last seen walking away from the Roger Williams campus toward Mount Hope Bay. He was never seen again. His disappearance wasn't reported until a week later when his family became concerned after not hearing from him. The search for Brian began immediately after he was declared missing, but there were few clues to work with. The investigation focused heavily on the area around Mount Hope Bay, as witnesses had reported seeing him in that direction. Despite the extensive searches, no significant clues were uncovered initially. Weeks later, in July 1997, a break in the case occurred when one of Brian's sneakers was found on the shore of Mount Hope Bay. This discovery sparked fears that Brian may have entered the water and drowned. However, no other remains were found, and the investigation was far from over. Investigators remained cautious about jumping to conclusions. Brian's family, particularly his mother, has maintained that foul play was involved in his disappearance. She has publicly expressed doubt that her son would simply vanish without a trace, believing that someone may have harmed him. Theories have ranged from Brian running away to start a new life to the possibility of suicide. But without solid evidence, the truth remains elusive. Adding to the eerie nature of the case is the mystery surrounding why Brian would have ventured toward the water that day. Some have speculated that Brian may have been in a fragile emotional state and walked toward the bay with dark intentions. Others wonder whether he could have encountered someone along the way who played a role in his disappearance. As years passed, the case of Brian Nisenfeld faded from the headlines, but his family has never given up hope of finding out what happened to their beloved son. The lack of closure has haunted them, and the question remains, what happened to Brian on that cold January day? Was it a tragic accident, a premeditated act, or something more sinister? Despite being more than 2 decades old, this case continues to baffle investigators, leaving a void in the hearts of those who loved Brian.